Good morning, everyone. This morning, I'm going to share with you how I typically start a brand new garden bed. So when I'm going into something like the existing lawn, someplace where I've never had a bed before. Now, as those of you who have watched my channel before probably know, I am gardening in Zone 6A, Ohio, on predominantly clay soil. So when I start a new bed, I take a couple of extra steps to improve that native soil to ensure that I have success when I plant my fruits and vegetables. Now, I have found that spending that little bit of extra time on the front end to work with and improve my native soil gives me better results and ends up being more cost effective than doing something like building raised beds or bringing in a bunch of compost and topsoil to dump on top of the existing soil. So that is my primary focus here. And before I jump in, because I know I'm going to get questions about it, I am not 100% no-dig, and I have some good reasons for that, which I will share in an upcoming video. An exception to this is I have done no-dig potato beds, but as I will explain later in this video, that's more about breaking in new planting areas than it is actually optimizing the crop yields. But I am 100% in favor of minimizing disruption to the soil web as much as possible. I like to start new garden beds a couple of different ways, but I almost always begin with killing off the grass. To do this, I use one of two methods. When killing off the grass during the cooler months, I usually smother it, most often by putting down a layer of cardboard and then covering that with leaf mulch, or sometimes I use a dark colored opaque tarp. I let this sit for as long as possible. Ideally, I will do this in the fall and let it set the entire winter. In the warm summer months, I use solarization to kill off the grass. I put plastic tarps over the area and let them sit for several weeks to several months, allowing the heat of the sun to kill off the existing grass and weeds. Sometimes I use clear plastic, which seems to kill off the grass faster in the heat of summer, but it does allow some weed seeds to germinate. Otherwise, I use opaque tarps, or for particularly large areas, silage tarps. After the grass has been killed back, I ideally broad fork, or sometimes I till the area. I know what you're saying. What? You just told us how you were 100% in favor of not disrupting the soil. I am not a fan of tillage. However, I'm just being realistic. Sometimes I don't have the time to broad fork an entire plot by myself, or I have to get that plot planted today. So there are times when I will go through with a tiller once in order to break up the clay enough for planting. It's very difficult for seeds to take on a flat baked surface of clay soil. After that one-time tillage, I will not come back through and till again. And with good reason. According to the Iowa State University Extension, frequent tillage over many seasons can lead to a total breakdown of soil structure and overall soil quality. A hard pan can develop, effectively cutting off root elongation, crop development, and yield. Definitely not what I am aiming for. But again, if I can manage it, I prefer using a broad fork. A broad fork allows me to loosen the soil without flipping it over. So I'm creating pockets where oxygen and water can move through the soil while minimizing the disruption to the soil's beneficial inhabitants. The other benefit is that with tillage and other methods that flip the soil, you end up bringing weed seeds that are buried back up to the surface, giving them a chance to germinate and grow. Broad forking avoids this as well. Now, a person could plant after this, particularly if you had some nice compost or aged manure that you could incorporate into the soil. But I have a couple of extra steps because I feel it helps improve my soil further prior to planting my cash crops. My next step is to plant a cover crop. Depending on the season, I will use different crops, but some of my go-tos are typically things like tiller radish, winter rye, buckwheat, oats, vetch, and winter peas. Now, timing-wise, if I've killed off my sod through the fall and winter months and am planting cover crop in the early to mid-spring, I'll typically use a blend of oats, vetch, and winter peas, or annual rye. These can be terminated mid-summer, and then the new plot planted with late summer or fall crops. Now, if I'm killing off grass through the summer, I will plant cover crops in the late summer, early fall, sometimes doing a quick buckwheat cover, followed by something like winter rye and or tiller radish, both of which help break up clay. These crops will either be terminated the following spring, in the case of the rye, or winter kill in the case of the radish, and my bed is ready for spring or early summer planting. And my very final step prior to planting my cash crops is to elevate my beds. Depending on the shape or size I'm dealing with, I will either form raised rows, the length of the plot and approximately 2 feet wide, or form rectangular raised beds, typically anywhere from 6 to 12 feet long and 4 feet wide. I scrape all that nice loose soil and pull it up on top of the new beds or rows, and this helps create devoted walkways, which are lower than my planting areas. So this helps in a couple of ways. By having a devoted walkway, I'm avoiding any kind of additional compaction in the planting area, and by elevating my planting area, that's helping with drainage in those areas as well. Finally, I'll top off that new bed or row with some compost or aged manure if I have any on hand. Not related to the bed itself, but I will then mulch those walkways either with cardboard and hay or wood chips. And now that new planting bed or row is all ready for my fruits or vegetables that I want to grow. Now I realize that timeline is a little longer than some folks want to take on building a new bed. I know that a lot of times when folks get the urge to plant, they want to do it now. But gardening with clay soil is a marathon, not a sprint. It can yield up some amazing results, but it does take a little TLC and patience. Now that being said, I have had decent results with no-dig potato beds. Notice I said decent, not optimal. I still have better yields with my traditional in-ground trenching and hilling method. But if I want to start on a new garden plot and still get some kind of edible yield out of it that very first season, I like this no-dig potato bed method. Now be sure to check out my video on that linked above for the full details, but essentially I'm using the potatoes to break in the plot for planting the following seasons, say late summer or fall, or even into the next spring. One thing to be aware of with this technique is that unless you are producing a lot of your own compost or have a lot of composted manure and your own hay and straw, that this is probably going to require some purchased inputs, so it's just something to be aware of up front. But I'd love to hear from you. What is your preferred way to start a brand new garden bed? And if you found today's video helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.